All right, Billy Cunningham, let's continue. Reds baseball kicks off at 6:07 tonight with Lance McAllister and more. Hiba Krisht hails from Beirut. She's currently a student at Indiana University. She's on to discuss her journey from Islamic to an atheist, and she also has been on the HBO series Vice and is a popular blogger and speaker. Hiba Krisht, welcome, I think, for the first time to the Bill Cunningham Show. Hiba, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me.
Let's go back in time. Tell me the journey that got you from Beirut to Bloomington, Indiana.
Sure. Well, I'm originally from Beirut. I'm the child of first-generation immigrants who took their children back to the Middle East, because they wanted us to have an Islamic upbringing, and they thought that American schools would corrupt us, et cetera, et cetera. We ended up in Beirut around when I was in my teens. We were in Saudi Arabia before that. And I found myself in the middle of a very strict fundamentalist community, basically Hezbollah culture. I was surrounded by the entire religious framework, where, there's this religious structure and it dictates how we ought to dress and speak and eat, and where to go to school and what to do. And I ended up trying to find a way to escape. When I was 18, I tried to run away from home. I thought that being in Lebanon, which is one of the most liberal Arab countries, one of the most liberal Muslim countries in the world as well, Muslim majority countries, I should say, because there's a significant Christian population, I thought that I would have a chance. And so I tried to leave home when I was 18. I was hunted down by Hezbollah, brought back, and that was at the point at which I realized that it would be really, really hard for me to escape, that I lived in a very insular community where women's bodies and their conduct and their lives were viewed to be something that the community had a right to claim. And so I realized that the only way that I would be able to leave would be by conforming really hard. So I changed my strategy, and I decided that I was going to be the perfect Muslim girl. I should mention that I wore the Muslim veil, the hijab, since I started when I was 8 years old. I wore it for a total of 15 years. And it was only after graduate school, after a lot of years of building up my family's trust again, doing all the faith things, praying and fasting and being modest and not talking to men. After all of that time, I convinced my parents to let me come to the U.S. for grad school, in the field that didn't exist in the Middle East. And there was a lot of gatekeeping, there was a lot of testing, there was a lot of hiding and double life stuff. But eventually I was able to apply, get accepted to a really great program, and I came here. I'm no longer in that program, by the way. But yeah, this is basically that's the outline of my journey.
Well, Hiba, from what you say, and I've spoken to other Muslim women that have escaped from this system, it almost sounds like slavery and the Underground Railroad was there to get African Americans out of the South to the North. But this is the 21st century. And you're saying that to be a female in the Muslim world, even a liberal country like Lebanon, you were almost like a chattel slave based upon your gender, and you conjured up for years a way to get out to get your human rights back.
That's right. I mean, in many ways it was like that. I was stuck in an insular fundamentalist community where there were very, very few, avenues for escape or for help, where, I'm from a country where domestic violence and marital rape are not criminalized for explicitly religious reasons. But the thing is, it's not the same for all the women where I come from, and it's not the same for all the women in the Middle East. I just happen to be born in one of the worst societies, and I've found that there are very, very similar experiences with women in very, very fundamentalist Christian societies in the U.S. as well. Women who can't escape the Quiverful movement, or Mormonism, or other fundamentalist doctrines that say that women have to silence themselves, cover their bodies, not leave the home, not speak to men, not have lives, and where it's very, very difficult because there are just so many community mechanisms in place to keep someone in line if they dare to step out.
Well, the difference, though, if you're in Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, and you're a girl, the dominant way of treating women in many fundamentalist Sharia-driven Muslim countries is the way you described your life. And when you talk about certain sects in Utah and some aspects of Mormonism, that is true. But in general, you can get out, but it's difficult. Yes. But in Saudi Arabia, if you would have stayed there and towed the company line, if you would have done what was required of you, you'd have no choice of who you married, no choice of where you go to college, no choice whether you have children or not, no choice if you're raped or not, and nobody's going to come up to you and say, hey, you've been raped, and therefore go to the police. If you're raped in a Muslim country, there's no police to go to, correct?
This is the case in the stark majority of Muslim majority countries, I would say. And it is the case for the stark majority of women. And you're very right in the fact that I had to escape my entire country, in order to find the recourse that I would need to become independent and free. Whereas, someone within a fundamentalist community within the U.S., once they escape their community, in large part, they're able to find help. Part of it is the legal system. You're correct. Part of it is that Islamic norms are coded into law. For instance, in Lebanon, a woman cannot leave the country without her father or her husband's permission. In many cases, it depends on her age. If she's unmarried, and if she's married, then her husband must sign off. Saudi Arabia, it's the same thing. Women are not allowed to travel without a guardian's consent. And their husbands or their brothers or their fathers or whatever male figure is closest to them in their lives is considered their guardian. In many countries, women, the virtue of women is, there is a gatekeeping process that is still intense that, I was subjected to a virginity test when I was 18. I was brought into the gynecologist's office, and she did not have any qualms about submitting to my parents' request that she check my virginity, even though it violates every, medical ethical code out there. And this is a thing that is very, very prevalent in Muslim majority countries. It's a big problem in Indonesia right now. And I point this out because, there are some Muslim apologists such as Riza Aslan who like to say things, who like to point to countries such as the Philippines and Indonesia as having full rights for women. But even in the countries that we can point to where women's rights are the most equal among Muslim majority countries, it's still very, very bad.
So since you've escaped, talk to me about this. When you've escaped Lebanon, you got to America, you're at Indiana University of Bloomington now. Do you ever have a desire? Do you have a desire to go back home? Can you go back and see your mom and dad?
I do. Oh, not my dad. No, I never want to see my dad. But I don't have a desire to go back home in terms of the community I was living in. I do have a very strong desire to go back to Beirut. I would love to experience Beirut, Lebanon as a free woman. Again, I come from a very provincial sectarian country where the laws that apply to me don't apply to other people in the country, even other women, because the laws that apply, there's a thing called personal status laws where the laws of the religion that you're born into are applied to you. So, a person born into a Christian sect will not have the same rules that I had in a Shia sect and Hezbollah culture. And if I were to go back to Beirut, it would be as a free woman. It would be, maybe in the summers, maybe I'd rent a flat on the Mediterranean, and I would get to experience the country on my own terms without the veil on my head. That is the only way in which I would want to go back and experience my country.
What do you see happening? Is there an awakening going on, whether it's the Arab Spring or something else? Can we look forward in the next 10 or 20 years on a course of improving the human rights of females, or do you see things staying the same or getting worse?
Well, in terms of human rights for women, I would say that there's an upturn. There are movements, and people are lashing back. When I was growing up, and when I was forced to wear this hijab, this veil over my head, and over my body, and it was a very conservative form of hijab. It was such that I couldn't even show, even a sliver of my wrist. That was too much sinfulness. My very limbs, my hair, all of that was so hypersexualized that if a man even saw it, it was considered such a great grave offense. And we would be told things like, no person would choose an unwrapped piece of candy that's been touched by a million people over a wrapped piece of candy. We'd be told things that, our hijab was like an oyster around the pearl of our bodies, and we were like pearls. Now I'm seeing Muslim women object to that kind of rhetoric and say, I'm not an object, I'm not a candy for you to consume, I'm not a pearl for you to hide away. I see Muslim women pushing back against this rhetoric and saying, if I wear hijab, if I put this cloth over my head, it's going to be for other reasons. It's not because I am nothing but a sex object to men. I see a lot of change in that regard. I see LGBTQ rights coming up more in the Middle East. I see people being more aware of how we treat refugees and migrant workers. I see, more NGOs for women's rights, more pressure to criminalize domestic violence and marital rape where that's not happening. There is generally a very high awareness among the youth. The internet helps a lot. There are now ways to connect to ex-Muslim communities. I had never heard of that when I was in the Middle East, but now we have the Council of Ex-Muslims of Britain that, people in Europe can refer to, and there's the ex-Muslims of North America, that people who are struggling with their faith and they want an alternative outside the doctrine of their families and their communities. There's stuff going on, and I'm hoping that it's only upwards from here.
Well, Hiba, Krisht, we got to run. If the American people want to get a hold of you, do you have a website or an email address that you want to give out or not?
Yeah, I do. You can catch me at availinadarkplace@gmail.com. You can also find my blog at exmuslimblogs.com, and that blog is called A Veil in a Dark Place. And I have a query and a proposal and 50,000 words of my memoir written if any agents are interested in getting in touch.
All right, Hiba, thank you very much, and Godspeed, and may you live out all the glories of America, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, let's